Hundreds of cyclists die every year because they don't have what we now make. We make the world's best bicycle lights. They react to danger, so you as a cyclist can focus not on the traffic, but enjoying the wonderful sensation of the wind in your hair. Well, I say the wind in your hair, but actually for me, perhaps the wind in your face is more apt. I'm Phillip McAleese, co-founder of T-Sense, and I'm here today to tell you a little bit about our design journey, and specifically I'd like to look a little bit at crowdfunding. We use crowdfunding very successfully, and we want to share a little bit of our learnings from that, of both some of the juicy bits about what not to do, but also some tips about what we think you should do as well. So my journey actually starts a number of years ago. I was a technology lead at an investment bank in Singapore, looking after client-facing technology. And like most busy executives, I had very little time to fit any kind of exercise into my daily routine. So, like a lot of busy execs, I took up cycling again as a way of trying to keep fit and unwind at the end of a busy day. I found that it was a really enjoyable experience. Singapore has the most wonderful roads and phenomenal infrastructure, and my journey took into it some beautiful tracks along the side of reservoirs, part of the Formula One circuit, which was closed. I used to cycle down the start and finish straight, looking at the names like Raikkonen and Schumacher and all the greats and the legends. And then I come to the road section, and while they were perfectly smooth roads, Singapore is a melting pot of different cultures. And so at times there were a number of different ideas about how the traffic should behave. And me as a cyclist didn't always feel particularly safe in a lot of those situations. So I looked around and saw that a lot of the cars had daylight visible running lights on them. And I looked into the reasons behind that, and that's because in Europe they identified between 5 and 10% accident reduction for those cars that had them. And I thought, well, actually, if something as big as a car needs it, then me and my bicycle, I absolutely need it as well. So I went out and bought some bike lights that were bright enough to be visible in the daytime. The difficulty was that to be visible in daytime, you need to be incredibly bright, and particularly in Singapore where you're near the equator and the sun's incredibly direct. And so they ended up being very big, very bulky. They tended to have external battery packs. And then you get to the end of your ride, you don't want to leave them on your bike because they're big, heavy, cumbersome things, and they're expensive and they will be stolen. So you end up taking these things off, and you've got these gangly wires and battery packs. What do you do with it? It's just not practical. So I was cycling along one day looking at the smartphone on my handlebars, and I realized that it had a level of situational awareness. It knew a little bit about the environment around me. It knew where I was going, a little bit about the environment. I thought, what if we used the smart sensor technology from the mobile phone, integrated into the lights to give it situational awareness? Then it could be bright when it needs to be at road junctions, filtering in roundabouts and so on, and conserve energy when it's not in one of these situations, so it can provide me with a good solution, but without the bulk and the weight. So I'd been looking for a while for the reason to give up my corporate career and go and try my own thing. And so I started to talk to more and more people about this idea that I'd had. And the more cyclists that I spoke to, the more they shared the same pain points that I had. And I thought, well, actually, maybe this is something we could do. So my wife is Australian, and I moved back to Northern Ireland, and we set up the company, and we created T-Sense. So let's have a little look at what it is it does.
T-Sense is the first and only intelligent bike light with road sense. It uses patent-pending sensor technology to sense and react to its environment. It flashes brighter and faster to command attention when you need it most. Situations like arriving or leaving a junction, filtering in traffic, avoiding obstacles, negotiating roundabouts, and more. It's time to upgrade to the most advanced lights on the planet. Switch to T-Sense and get a light that actively works for you so you can relax and enjoy the ride. T-Sense, the intelligent bike light with road sense.
So after about a year, having moved back from Singapore, we had prototypes, and we were looking for a way to really raise money to be able to go ahead and produce those. And so we weren't sure if it looked a bit like an iceberg or a mountain. The more we looked at it, we initially thought it was a mountain. The more we looked at it, the more we thought actually we knew a lot less than we would have imagined, and it was probably more of an iceberg. We chose crowdfunding as a way of actually funding our business. Very simple concept, small amount of money, a lot of people, and that obviously creates a big party atmosphere at the end as you fund your project. There's a broad spectrum of crowdfunding out there today, all the way from equity-style Dragon's Den giving away a piece of your company through to loan funding for more established companies. We actually chose the product-based way of doing that, and there were a number of things that we thought were good about that. First of all, we didn't have to give away equity in the company, so we got to maintain all the control, and that was wonderful as a small company. You also get the money up front, and that's a really important thing for us. We didn't want to take the risk of spending many tens of thousands of pounds on tooling without the certainty that there was genuinely a market there. And that really was what we were looking for, was that validation. We thought not only to raise the money for funding, but we later discovered when we went into the retailers, it was a wonderful tool to be able to say, we've got this new light, we think it's a wonderful idea. Not only do we think it's great, but more than 500 people put their hands in their pockets and paid money, real money, for something that nobody had actually seen at that point. We later discovered that it was wonderful validation with investors as well. I was at an angel investing event and an investor came up to me and said, we absolutely love your investor communications. And I looked a bit puzzled and I thought the wine was phenomenal at dinner. I don't know how much of you've had, but I haven't had as much as you. And then she realized from the look of puzzlement on my face, and she said, we've been reading all of your Kickstarter updates. We love that you make them all public and that you're very upfront about any production issues that you've had, any delays that you've had, any successes that you've had. And so it's a really wonderful way to kind of get a little bit about your company ethos and the way you work out there in a much broader context than you might expect. It was a wonderful way as well to get noticed by the media. Crowdfunding platforms, while they do have some challenges, we managed to get quite a lot of articles out of it, and I'll go through those in a little bit. So we chose the crowdfunding platform Kickstarter, which many of you will have heard of. I wish we could say that we did a thorough analysis of the different platforms and we chose the one that was most suited to us. In reality, we were rushing to launch the product. We knew that the lights were incredibly seasonal, and we wanted to get it live as quickly as possible to get it on sale before winter, not have to wait until the following year. We picked the crowdfunding platform Kickstarter purely because it was the biggest in the market and we expected to have the largest amount of organic find. We were sort of the impression a little bit, if you build it, they will come. We were sort of a little bit right and that, a little bit wrong, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Some of the immediate things that we got, we ran a 31-day campaign. We were funded after only 8 days, which was phenomenal. And we went on to raise nearly 3 times our funding target. It's worth not running your campaign for too long. There is sort of a slowdown in the middle of the campaign. You get a wonderful hit at the start as everyone finds your project and you generate a lot of buzz, and you get a lot at the end as people say it's been funded and want to jump on board. That bit in the middle is incredibly difficult, so don't extend your campaigns too long. It also allowed us to really look at pricing. We were unsure of what our technology advantage would mean in terms of being able to price compared to what was out there in the market. The grey line that you see behind me is a cross-section of the sale prices on sites like Amazon and Chain Reaction Cycles and Weagle. And the green is actually the sales that we achieved through Kickstarter. It showed us that actually our product was able to command a price premium in the marketplace. And we actually increased our prices twice after Kickstarter as a result of some of this feedback. We had 26 significant articles through the course of the Kickstarter campaign, and that continued beyond the Kickstarter campaign as well. We got some wonderful quotes from the media. So, big publications like Stuff magazine, Der Spiegel, which is a German weekly news magazine with more than 1 million copies sold. And that really drove a lot of traffic to our website and really helped with the whole market validation piece. We also got invitations to go on the Gadget Show and an ITV4 Cycle Show. We have now been featured on the Cycle Show, and we're just waiting for the next series of the Gadget Show to get on there as well. So I've probably made it sound incredibly easy. So you just get on your keyboard and press the crowdfunding button, and off you go. The reality of it is, of course, that it's not that easy. It is difficult, and I think it's actually becoming more difficult. Around 65% of all Kickstarter campaigns fail. Of those that do actually reach the funding target, the average amount raised is somewhere around about $10,000 US. And while a lot of people can name some of the big successes on Kickstarter, like the Pebble Watch, in technology, I think there's only around about a dozen projects that have raised more than $1 million. So it is incredibly difficult. To share a little bit about our journey, We launched in Kickstarter in October of 2013. That was about a year after Kickstarter launched in the UK. When it launched in the UK, it was with a big fanfare. It was covered by a lot of the broadsheets, by the BBC and so on. When we came along a year later, there'd been a number of projects on there, a few in cycling. Those projects hadn't delivered to their Kickstarter backers, and so when we approached, the Times, the Guardian, and so on, they said, we think it's a wonderful idea, but actually we're not going to cover it because these guys did whatever it was a year ago. They haven't delivered. How do we know you're going to be any better? So there's a lot of skepticism to do with Kickstarter projects, and I'll talk a bit later about how we overcome some of those. The other thing that it shouldn't be a crutch for a poor pitch. If you've got this product, it shouldn't take a crowdfunding campaign to tell you that that's not going to work, except as a piece of artwork or decoration. So I would encourage you to find 10 strangers and see if you can sell your idea, your concept, whatever it is you're trying to sell to those 10 strangers. Don't use your mum, because your mum will tell you it's the best thing ever. Don't use your friends, because they're likely to do the same. Go out and find some random people and actually see if you can get some initial validation. If you can, that's wonderful. I would then encourage you to go for crowdfunding. This is a quote from Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, world's richest man. And there's kind of two meanings I'd like to take out of this. First of all, he's really talking about where people are doing second and third campaigns. And so they think that doing what they did the first time, but doing it more, bigger, will actually work. And actually, that's not the case. There is a definite thing for coming first. Does anyone know who Alan Bean and Pete Conrad are? Can I maybe have a quick show of hands as to anyone who knows who that might be? Does anybody know, let me just check these names, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin? Exactly, so there's a definite thing for coming first. Obviously, first and second man on the moon versus third and fourth. Does anyone know how many men were on the moon? The answer was 12, and unfortunately no women. So it's really important to come first. Don't copy what's already out there. Be original and be different, and that's how you'll be differentiated and be remembered. So let's have a look at a couple of specific campaigns. This is one by a company called Revo Lights, and they put a number of LEDs all the way around the wheels of the bicycle. It's a lovely product, very well thought through. As the wheel is spinning, they use an accelerometer to tell which way the wheel's pointing, and they turn on all of the LEDs on the front of the front wheel and on the rear of the rear wheel, and it creates this sort of arc effect which illuminates both the road in front of the bicycle and of course the bicycle itself. So they captured the imagination. They were one of the early Kickstarter projects. They ran a second project, and they tried to do the same thing again, except with just effectively a cheaper version of a mudguard with lights in it, which creates a similar sort of arc effect. They launched it at the wrong time of year, and it just tanked. It didn't reach its funding goal, and they subsequently withdrew it. These guys, Gotham Lights, they did listen to their backers, so this is a light which differentiates really on being just very robust. It's designed to be bolted onto the bicycle with security screws and be very, very difficult to take it off again. They listened to their backers, ran a second campaign, and they created something that was smaller, lighter, a little bit more stylish, a bit less like perhaps the barrel of a revolver, and a bit more like, they did a lot of sort of aerospace references and so on. I think they call it the Afterburner and the Aviator. And so they did incredibly well out of that. But there have been some really incredible successes as well. This one is one of my favorites. It's a bicycle bell, and it costs about 30 euros. Now, who's going to buy a bicycle bell for 30 euros? And what they've done is incredibly, incredibly clever. They've made it all about the journey of the process of designing it. So it's not just about a bell. It's not that it's a better bell, it's a lighter bell. It's all about the engineers that craft it, the craftsmanship, the sound of the bell, how it will make you feel as a cyclist, and so on. And actually, they have a short 2-minute video which I'd like to share with you, just as an example of how to do it incredibly well for something that you think there may not be a market for.
We set out to bring a new level of engineering and craftsmanship to the bicycle bell. Our goal was simple: create a compact, versatile bell with powerful sound. The bell design process started with crafting the perfect dome. For this, we worked with Bevan Brothers in Connecticut, a company with over 100 years experience in the art of crafting bells. Together we've developed a dome that is compact, but with an unexpectedly loud and lasting ring. No bell is complete without a proper hammer. We've crafted an elegantly simple wire lever We wanted a bell that would mount to any handlebar. This meant engineering an entirely new mounting system. All components come together to create a thoroughly better bell.
Kickstarter helped us launch grip rings last year. Now we'd like your backing to get bell production going.
I think an incredible example there of how to do it well. So what are the things that I would share with you then as the keys to unlock a successful crowdfunding campaign? I actually have 6 tips. So first of all, it's about engagement. So crowdfunding is a community. I see so many projects that go on there and they create a project having never backed any themselves. It's incredibly easy to back projects. Go on there, register early and start backing them. It only takes a few pounds to back a pound on each particular project, and it looks like you've engaged with the community, even if necessarily you haven't spent a lot of time there. And that's a wonderful way of getting that initial validation when people come to look at your project. Video. We saw the excellent Spur cycle video there. If I were doing it again, and we do intend to launch a new project in September of this year, we'll spend a lot more time in the video and a lot more expense, because there are really 2 things about the campaign itself. It's the number of people you drive to see the campaign, and actually it's the video that people watch first, and that will determine a lot about the actual rate of how many people convert to become backers. Just to give you a feel, we've done a lot of analysis recently with some other projects that we've worked with in Kickstarter, and a good success rate in terms of conversion is around about 5% of the people who land on your page will turn into backers. If you have something that's a bit lower priced, so in the sort of $10 to $15 region, that can be an impulse purchase, you can get that up to about 10%, but that's the sort of number that you're looking at. Wait until you're ready and know how to manufacture. Of the big failures on Kickstarter, the majority of them have been able to sell the idea incredibly well, raise a very large amount of money, and then don't actually know how to produce it. So make sure you've got a manufacturing plan in place and you actually know how to create it. We were actually delayed in our project. We had a well-developed prototype whenever we launched, but we had a few teething issues around the design for the casing, which meant that we needed to spend a little bit more time to get it right before we were able to release it to our backers. We kept them informed through the process, but in hindsight, it would have been much better if we'd have been in a much better developed state before we'd gone to Kickstarter. Increasingly, because of failures, people are looking for certainty that you will be able to deliver what you've said you can, and actually having the finished product and being ready to just tick the button and be looking for the funding perhaps for just to get economies of scale for manufacture. That's an incredibly powerful way of improving your conversion rates. Commitment. Everyone will tell you that Kickstarter is, or any crowdfunding platform, is an incredible amount of commitment on your time. I actually liken it to having your first child. I have 2 children, and everybody tells you that your first child, you won't believe how busy it is, you won't believe how much time and effort that it sucks up. And it's a wonderful, exciting process at the same time. And crowdfunding is exactly the same. To get those first pings of emails from those backers, we had our first backer about 35 seconds after we launched the Kickstarter campaign, not even long enough for them to actually watch the whole video. It was just an incredible thrill to see that something we put out there was being backed by people we didn't know. So be ready for that level of commitment. And again, don't run incredibly long campaigns because it will just suck you dry. You'll find that your social media reach will be exhausted within the first sort of day or so. And then you focus a lot of time on generating press releases and so on. And that's an incredibly time-consuming and difficult process. As soon as your press release is used by one journalist, very few other journalists will unfortunately want to touch it, so you're constantly having to evolve and create. You can do a lot of preparation, of course, in advance for that, and it's incredibly useful to have a whole repertoire of releases from different angles and with different stories that you can quickly put out there to the press. Driving traffic to your site is incredibly important. So the two things that I mentioned, obviously converting the traffic when you get it there, but you've got to be seen. Just building it and hoping they will come is not an effective way of doing it. We found that we didn't use any paid advertising for our first campaign. For our second campaign, we would absolutely consider it. But actually what drove the best traffic was really the evaluations that we got, so the reviews or press releases and so on, that have been published by journalists as news articles. They carry a lot more weight with the public. Unfortunately, we weren't able to send samples of our products to journalists to be reviewed. We know another project which did that, and they had an incredible level of success and drove a huge amount more traffic than we were able to. And so in hindsight, we would absolutely send samples out to journalists, allow them to use it and to create their own stories, and that would help alleviate the burden of having to create hundreds of press releases as well. In terms of approaching journalists as well, everyone tries to reinvent the wheel. You've got to understand that journalists are incredibly busy people, and they get pestered by hundreds of people like you. There's a guy called Mike Butcher from TechCrunch, and he does a wonderful presentation, which I would encourage you to look up online, about how to actually approach journalists, how to give them a very short nugget to entice them in, and then how to send them the full press release, not using attachments, not using PDFs, using inline images, so they can very quickly assess what they want to use and really make it as easy as possible for them, as incredibly busy people, to want to notice you. Test, and test some more. With the majority of these crowdfunding platforms, you do have the ability to set up a campaign and to have people come and look at it, either in a closed fashion or in a sort of an early preview only mode. I would encourage you very much to do that. We made some last minute changes literally days before we went live that we think had a really significant part to play in our success on Kickstarter. And there's nothing better than getting feedback. So I often say that entrepreneurship is this sort of juxtaposition of the two ideals, that, you know, on the one hand you're this resilient, persistent person who really believes in your idea, who won't let anybody knock you down and carries on through to completion, but on the other side you need the humility to actually listen to other people and understand when you're wrong and when your ideas can be improved by the input of other people. So use the resources that are out there, use your social media, get a test group early, have a look and improve. And the final thing I'd like to share, if you are doing a Kickstarter campaign in particular, it can sometimes take a long time to get approval for those campaigns. So you can actually submit your campaign really early with not very much detail, and after you've got approval, you're actually able to go through and add extra detail into that campaign and go live at the moment of your choosing. Thank you.